Mechanically, 100%. So bodies, I like it.
Yeah.
I've just got too many little things sitting around. We're not using them, driving them. So
While every other dealer in the country was racing toward the newest, shiniest machines on the lot, one man in a small Indiana shop turned around and walked the other way. He wasn't chasing trends. He was chasing the things everyone else had already thrown out. Across America, the heavy equipment business had settled into a familiar pattern. Big-name dealerships representing Caterpillar, John Deere, Komatsu, and Case dominated the landscape, and the formula for success was simple on paper. Sell the newest models, wrap them in financing deals, back them with warranties, and let the service contracts keep customers coming back for years. It was a machine built on machines, predictable, profitable, and, for the most part, unremarkable. Then there was Clinton Chitwood, working out of southern Indiana, far from any corporate boardroom, quietly building something that didn't follow the script at all. His company, CNC Equipment, would go on to make one decision so unconventional that it reshaped how an entire industry thought about old iron. But to understand how it happened, you have to go back to where it started. Clinton grew up in Monroe County, Indiana, on land that had stayed in his family for generations. His father ran an excavating business, so heavy machinery wasn't some distant fascination. It was the backdrop of everyday life. Bulldozers, excavators, and tractors weren't treated like disposable tools that got traded in every few seasons. They were investments. Machines earned their keep through years of hard use, and if something broke, you fixed it. You didn't throw it away. That mindset, equipment as something to be maintained rather than replaced, would end up putting Clinton at odds with almost everyone else in the industry as the years went on. In 2004, he founded CNC Equipment. There was no grand unveiling, no venture capital, no 5-year plan to build a nationwide dealership chain. It started the way so many small equipment businesses do. Buy used machines, fix what's broken, sell them to contractors and farmers who needed something that worked without breaking the bank. On the surface, there was nothing special about it. Similar operations dotted the Midwest by the hundreds. If things had gone differently, CNC might have stayed exactly what it looked like. A small regional outfit known only to the people nearby. But things didn't go the way anyone expected. Around 2008, Clinton started buying something most dealers wouldn't touch: decommissioned military surplus vehicles. These weren't trade-ins from a construction fleet. They were machines that had spent years, sometimes decades, in active duty with the Army, the Marine Corps, or the National Guard before finally being retired. The path these vehicles took to reach a civilian buyer was long and winding. Under the Department of Defense's disposal process, retired equipment first got offered to other federal agencies. If nobody claimed it there, it moved down to state and local governments. Only after all of that did it finally land in public surplus auctions, where regular buyers could get their hands on it. By the time a vehicle made it that far, it usually carried a mixed bag of history. Sometimes meticulously documented, sometimes a total mystery. And the variety at these auctions was staggering. You might find an old M35 Deuce and a Half, the iconic 2.5-ton cargo truck that had been hauling gear since the early 1950s, or maybe a heavier M800 or M900 series truck. Add in Humvees from the 80s, engineering rigs, generators, trailers, forklifts, and recovery vehicles, and you had an inventory unlike anything a typical dealer would ever stock. Some of these machines had never left U.S. soil, spending their whole careers on domestic bases. Others had been overseas and back. Their ages spanned decades because the military didn't retire equipment based on how old it was. It retired equipment based on whether it could still do the job, following strict maintenance schedules instead. That created a strange contradiction. A lot of these trucks looked beat up, faded paint, worn seats, dents from years of hard use, but underneath that rough exterior sat drivetrains built to survive conditions most commercial vehicles were never designed for. Military specs demanded machines that could handle deserts, mountains, sub-zero cold, and deep mud without quitting, because out there, a breakdown wasn't just inconvenient, it could be dangerous. So these trucks were overbuilt. Heavy frames, simple mechanical systems, high ground clearance, and parts that were designed to be swapped and fixed in the field. But those same qualities that made them nearly indestructible also made them a hard sell. They were slow. They weren't comfortable. Plenty of them needed specialized know-how just to get running, and most were never built with civilian roads in mind. Nobody was clamoring to buy a rough-looking army truck when a modern pickup was sitting right next to it on the lot. Clinton saw it differently. He looked at these overlooked machines and recognized that with the right mechanical skill, some fabrication work, and a lot of patience, they could be turned into something genuinely useful. Their rugged, no-frills design meant they could keep running in places where a modern, computer-controlled machine would be dead in the water the moment something went wrong. So instead of selling these trucks exactly as they rolled off the auction lot, CNC started rebuilding them from the ground up. Crew cab conversions to add seating, upgraded suspensions for a smoother ride, custom steering setups, complete mechanical overhauls. Slowly, these forgotten military trucks were becoming practical work vehicles for construction crews, ranchers, emergency responders, and buyers in some of the most remote corners of the world. Most of that fabrication work happened right there in the shop, because a lot of the problems Clinton ran into couldn't be solved by flipping through a parts catalog. Every truck that rolled back out the door with a new lease on life added another layer to CNC's reputation as the shop that would take on jobs other people wouldn't even attempt. Looking back now, it's easy to assume this was an obvious opportunity. It wasn't. At the time, the entire industry was moving toward machines loaded with electronics, emissions equipment, and proprietary software. The big manufacturers were pouring billions into innovation, while most independent dealers focused on staying competitive with the latest inventory, financing options, and warranty coverage. Clinton went the opposite direction entirely, betting on machines that a lot of people considered outdated junk. Whether it was instinct or years of hands-on experience, he'd spotted something the rest of the industry had missed. For a lot of customers, especially the ones working far from a dealership or a sophisticated repair shop, simple and reliable beats advanced and complicated every single time. That single insight became the backbone of everything CNC equipment would go on to build. Here's the thing about most salesmen: they make their money getting you to say yes. Clinton built his reputation the opposite way, by teaching people when to say no. In October of 2012, CNC Equipment posted its first video to YouTube. There was no production crew, no script, no marketing strategy behind it. Clinton just set up a camera and pointed it at the work already happening in his shop. While most dealers were putting out polished advertisements and glossy brochures, he did something almost nobody else was doing. He showed people the ugly stuff. Rust, dents, leaks, broken parts. All of it right out in the open. Instead of short, punchy clips designed to grab attention for a few seconds, a lot of his videos ran 40 minutes or longer. Viewers followed him through muddy auction yards, climbed into the cabs of neglected bulldozers, crawled around excavators with thousands of hours on the clock, and watched entire engines get taken apart piece by piece. These weren't sales pitches. They felt more like detective work. A patch of fresh paint hiding rust underneath. Excessive play in a bucket pin. Hydraulic cylinders slowly weeping oil. Sloppy weld repairs on a frame that should never have been welded in the first place. To someone who knew what they were looking at, these small details told a story, and often it wasn't the story a seller wanted told. That willingness to call out flaws became the defining trait of the channel. Clinton pointed out cracked frames, chewed-up undercarriages, worn pivot points, leaking final drives, sloppy repairs, and machines that had clearly been neglected for years. Sometimes he walked straight past auction equipment without buying a single lot, explaining exactly why it wasn't worth the risk. Viewers quickly caught on that something different was happening here. He wasn't trying to convince anyone that every machine on the lot was a hidden gem. He was teaching people how to think like a seasoned buyer. Even when CNC had inventory sitting right there for sale, his advice stayed consistent. If the numbers don't add up, walk away. That same honesty spilled over into a much bigger problem: online fraud. As buying and selling heavy equipment moved onto the internet through the 2010s, so did the scammers. Criminals started building fake dealer websites, stealing photos from legitimate auction houses, copying real equipment listings, and advertising machines that didn't even exist. Buyers, sometimes located states or even continents away, were talked into wiring large deposits, only to find out later that there was never any equipment to buy. Some victims lost tens of thousands of dollars. Others lost far more. The problem had grown so widespread that industry groups and auction companies were regularly putting out warnings about equipment scams. Clinton took it a step further and pulled these schemes into the daylight himself. He made videos breaking down fake dealer sites, pointing out suspiciously low prices, spotting stolen photos, and exposing the pressure tactic scammers used to rush buyers into wiring money before they had time to think. He walked viewers through how to verify a physical address, request serial numbers, confirm ownership, and inspect equipment in person whenever possible. In some videos, he even showed how the exact same stolen photos were being recycled across multiple fake listings under different company names. There's an irony to all of this. By teaching people how to spot dishonest dealers, Clinton also made it a lot easier for viewers to judge legitimate ones, including his own company. And maybe that's exactly why it worked. The videos never followed the typical influencer playbook. No over-the-top reactions. No manufactured drama. No claims that every single machine was some once-in-a-lifetime find. People kept coming back because they knew they were going to get the truth, even when the truth wasn't flattering. Over time, that built something no amount of advertising ever could trust. At a time when a huge chunk of American manufacturing was heading overseas, and modern equipment was becoming harder and harder to fix yourself, CNC leaned hard into the opposite idea. Rebuild what's already out there. It sounds like a simple decision, but it went directly against decades of industry momentum. Starting in the late 1990s and picking up speed through the 2000s, manufacturers poured money into cleaner diesel engines, onboard computer systems, electronic controls, and increasingly complex emissions equipment, all designed to meet tightening environmental regulations. The machines that came out of this shift were quieter, more efficient, and more powerful than ever before. They were also a lot more complicated enough that when something went wrong, only the manufacturer had the tools and software to fix it. CNC took a completely different approach. Why scrap a machine that can still be brought back to life? Equipment rolled in from auctions, retiring construction fleets, government surplus sales, and private sellers. From there, it got torn down, inspected, repaired, modified, and upgraded, all inside the company's Indiana shop. Welding, fabrication, machining, hydraulic work, custom steel fabrication. It all happened under one roof. Clinton didn't treat every machine like it was the same as the last one. Each project got approached like its own unique puzzle. One of the most valuable tools in that shop isn't some massive excavator or a brand new crane. It's a CNC plasma cutting table that can carve precise steel components straight out of raw plate. Paired with the welding and fabrication equipment on hand, it lets the team build brackets, structural supports, mounting systems, and replacement parts that might not even be available to order anymore. That capability becomes especially valuable when you're working on an old military truck or a discontinued piece of construction equipment, where finding an original replacement part can be nearly impossible, or ridiculously expensive if you do find one. Keeping as much of the process in-house as possible also means quality control stays tight, because the people doing the work are never more than a few steps away. Nowhere was this philosophy more visible than in the military truck conversions the company became known for. Old Army cargo trucks that once hauled supplies over rough, unforgiving terrain got a second life as practical civilian work vehicles. Crew cab conversions added extra seating. Air ride suspension upgrades made them far more comfortable to drive. Custom steering setups improved handling. One-off fabrication solved problems unique to each individual customer's needs. None of these upgrades came from a factory options list. They were engineered right there in the shop, through careful measuring, cutting, welding, and plenty of trial and error. What came out the other end kept the rugged durability that made these trucks valuable to the military in the first place, while becoming genuinely practical for contractors, ranchers, municipalities, and buyers working in remote parts of the world. Meanwhile, the rest of the heavy equipment industry kept heading further in the opposite direction, leaning more and more on electronic control modules, proprietary diagnostic software, advanced sensors, and emissions technology designed to meet strict federal standards. Sure, these innovations meant cleaner exhaust and better fuel efficiency, but they also changed what it meant to actually own a machine. Diagnosing a modern engine increasingly required specialized software and dealer-authorized tools that regular owners simply didn't have access to. That shift helped fuel a much bigger conversation across the country, the right to repair debate. Farmers, independent mechanics, and equipment owners argued that buying a machine should come with the practical ability to fix it yourself. Manufacturers pushed back, saying restricted access was necessary to protect safety systems, emissions compliance, and their own intellectual property. Eventually, this disagreement worked its way into courtrooms and legislatures, with companies like John Deere becoming the face of the controversy after years of public pressure. CNC's whole business model naturally lined up with that same movement, even without Clinton ever framing it that way. He consistently pointed customers toward equipment they could actually understand and maintain themselves, using ordinary tools and hands-on knowledge. He never argued that modern technology was inherently bad. His real question was always whether all that added complexity actually served the person using the machine. If an older piece of equipment can get fixed in the field with a basic toolkit, while a newer one sits idle waiting on a specialized technician and a laptop, which one is really doing its job? By this point, the playbook seemed obvious to anyone watching from the outside. Expand. Open new locations. Hire more managers. Chase bigger numbers. CNC did almost the exact opposite. As the company's YouTube audience grew steadily through the 2010s and into the 2020s, they found themselves in a position most small businesses spend decades trying to reach. Videos covering equipment inspections, military truck builds, auction trips, and shop projects were racking up millions of monthly views, and inquiries started pouring in from far beyond Indiana. The internet had quietly erased geography for a company that once served mostly local buyers. Machines were now shipping across the country and overseas. For a lot of entrepreneurs, that kind of momentum would be the green light to expand aggressively. For Clinton and his wife Bridget, it became a reason to slow down and protect what they'd already built instead. A lot of that international demand came down to practicality. Buyers in remote parts of Africa, Australia, Alaska, and other far-flung regions often valued mechanical simplicity over cutting-edge technology, because in places where dealer support was thin and replacement parts could take weeks to arrive, a rugged, easily reparable machine was worth more than the latest electronics. Clinton had spotted that demand years earlier, long before it became a growing trend. By this point, CNC had the infrastructure that usually signals rapid growth is coming. A modern facility, reinforced floors built to support heavy machinery, serious fabrication and machining capability, and an online audience most marketing departments would kill for. Plenty of companies have turned exactly that kind of momentum into multiple locations, outside investment, or a full-blown national dealership network. Industry history is full of small family businesses that scaled into regional chains this exact way. Clinton chose not to. He's explained his reasoning in pretty direct terms over the years. Keeping as much of the business in-house as possible matters more than growing fast, because rapid expansion almost always comes at the cost of control. More locations mean more managers. More managers mean more layers between a decision and the person actually doing the work. Quality gets harder to monitor. Communication slows down. Decisions that used to happen across a workbench start happening in meetings and reports instead. That decision looks even more unusual when you consider how the rest of American business operates. Across manufacturing, retail, and industrial services, growth is treated as the ultimate measure of success. Companies chase acquisitions, open new locations, bring in outside investors, and prioritize scale to cut costs and grab more market share. Publicly traded companies live under constant pressure to hit bigger numbers every single quarter. Choosing to stay relatively small in that environment can actually require more discipline than choosing to expand. But staying tightly controlled lets CNC hold onto something a lot of larger operations lose along the way: consistency. The fabrication, the rebuilding, the welding, the machining, the customization, it all stayed under one roof instead of getting farmed out to third-party shops. CNC never lobbied lawmakers or positioned itself as some kind of industry activist. It didn't need to. It just quietly built an alternative to everything the rest of the industry was doing: one honest video and one rebuilt machine at a time. As modern excavators, bulldozers, and tractors leaned further into electronic controls, GPS systems, telematics, and proprietary software, and as the broader right-to-repair fight gained national attention, Clinton never tried to turn himself into a spokesperson for the cause. He just kept doing what he'd always done: restoring older machines, extending their working lives through careful rebuilding and fabrication, and giving contractors, farmers, and remote buyers a level of independence a lot of newer equipment simply couldn't offer. That same transparency carried into the local community too, through support for charities, emergency services, and events benefiting kids in Brown County, Indiana. It wasn't a marketing move. It was just an extension of the same philosophy that built the company in the first place. In the end, CNC Equipment's greatest asset was never its size. It was the trust it earned, one honest video and one rebuilt machine at a time. While the rest of the industry measured success in square footage and market share, Clinton and Bridget Chitwood proved there was another way to build something that lasts, through craftsmanship, honesty, repairability, and the kind of customer confidence that no amount of advertising can buy.